project selection, I think, is 80% of the problem. Let me just start and stop there. Like that, which would be true for any IT project of innovation. But like, you've got to pick a project that's tractable for the AI. The second place people go wrong is they're like, well, I'm in experimentation mode. I don't want like high stakes if I fail to deliver. So let me pick a toy problem. And so the other place people go wrong is they pick a problem that's a good fit for the AI, but it doesn't matter very much. It doesn't deliver a lot of value. You get the thing built with AI, and then there is no ROI case to put it in production, and so you don't.
Welcome to Speaking C-Suite, where today's CFOs have evolved from financial gatekeepers to strategic force multipliers, driving growth across the entire organization. I'm David Hemingway. I'm the host of the Angel Nest podcast, and I'm joined by Johnny Walker from Ruled Outsourced CFO and Accounting Services. Ruled are the startup finance experts, and they are the driving force behind this series. Good to be back with you, Johnny.
Great to be here again, David. Thank you.
Today, we're talking AI. And to do that, it's a pleasure to welcome Jocelyn Goldfein, who is a managing director at Zeta Venture Partners. There, she backs early-stage AI startups, and she's particularly excited about the potential of AI to optimize infrastructure, security, supply chains, and worker productivity. Her career as an entrepreneur and engineering leader spans from early-stage startups to high-growth years at Facebook and VMware, and she is widely recognized as an industry expert on product strategy, infrastructure, and scaling startups. Welcome, Jocelyn. Tell us what's happening at Zeta Venture Partners these days.
Oh my gosh, what's not happening? I mean, I feel like every year I've been in venture, which is 8 or 9 years now, has felt like a fire hose, and this year is that, but exponentially more.
So just before we get into the meat of the conversation here, I just want to say a quick thank you again to our sponsors. That's the Left, Tabs, and Rillet. All three of them CFO tech platforms focused on finance and accounting space. Really appreciate their support. They made Speaking C-Suite happen. And I think particularly important for today, they actually all have AI as an integral component of their platforms. They use it to varying degrees. And so I think some of the detail we get into here is going to be particularly relevant for understanding their value add as well. So thank you to them.
Yeah, so really looking forward to examining the real state of AI in enterprise, cutting through all the hype to figure out what AI is actually delivering and where it's delivering value. And Jocelyn, to do that, want to talk about a recent MIT report suggests we might be overestimating AI's immediate impact on enterprise productivity. So curious where you're seeing AI deliver measurable ROI in B2B scenarios versus areas where it's still mostly a hope and a promise.
Yeah, I think collectively, I do know that MIT study, and I think what it reflects is that people got so excited about AI on day one that that a lot of enterprises really rushed in and started trying to kind of DIY and build from scratch with it, or pay systems integrators to DIY and build from scratch with it, which is the same thing. You interact with a chatbot like ChatGPT, and you think this is a wizard in a box; it can do anything. And the truth is, it's sort of like giving all of your employees, a desktop with Mac OS or Microsoft Windows and no applications. It's like this incredibly powerful machine sitting in front of you, but it doesn't know how to do very many things. Jokes and limericks and summarizing documents have limited utility in enterprise workflows. And if you ask it to sort of underwrite a claim or these other kinds of business productivity tasks that you might want an AI assistant helping you out with, it's not very good out of the box. I mean, it's so magical out of the box because it's so good at so many things, but it's sort of 80% good enough, which is if you hired an employee who was 80% good enough, you'd turn around and fire them. So and so that I think is what's happening is people went and hired AI to try to do things out of the box rather than kind of build applications and workflows, figure out, they tried to sprinkle AI into what they were already doing rather than build bespoke AI native applications that understood what AI could do, that fine-tuned it for a specific use case like insurance claims underwriting or accounting, and actually built AI native workflows to do that. And I'll tell you the one exception to that rule, the one place where people really started was something built into the application workflow, and it's just because it was the very first thing that was tried, or one of the earliest applications to ship. If you think to the timeline, ChatGPT drops in November of 2022. That's the browser moment of AI, sort of when everybody realizes what they're missing out on, and then Microsoft GitHub launches Copilot in March of 2023, just 3 or 4 months later, because Microsoft had been working hand in hand with OpenAI even prior to that ChatGPT drop. And so the one place, or one of the first places where enterprises are seeing a ton of value, is through software developer productivity, because we're all now typing 10 times faster with the AI finishing our sentences. And that is, and I think that's partly because there's really great training data and these models are very good at generating code. It's a task that's all about understanding and generating text. So it plays to the strengths of the models. It's an incredibly valuable task for businesses. But frankly, it's also a place where we actually started with an app. We started with GitHub Copilot instead of starting with the model, the raw model, and tried to make it do something useful without building an app around it. And so I think the where enterprise value is being delivered is where entrepreneurs got their boots on and started building applications, and we are starting to have some applications in the market with maturity. And we're not just trying to get these vast horizontal models in a box to do something valuable or useful on their own without that layer. So coding is obviously number one with a bullet. It's I don't at this point know a software developer who's not using these tools. Students who are learning are learning with these tools. It's really exciting. The kind of, people are going to start their careers in software development equipped with these tools, and I think they're going to reinvent the whole concept of software engineering. I think we're really going through a transition. This is exciting for me. This is my home territory where I spent most of my career before I became a VC. And so I just think we're going through a transition in software development that's kind of like the transition from punch cards to programming languages. And now we're going from programming languages to natural conversation as the medium of instructing a computer to build a product for us. So that's a really exciting transition. Obviously, the enterprise value goes far beyond that, though. I would say the other places where people got going earlier when the apps are really good, customer support is starting to be widespread. Less so the chatbot actually talking directly with the consumer. You can find a little bit of that on very adventurous, brands' websites, but there's a whole lot of it sitting next to the person at the call center, helping them solve your problem faster. And businesses are really starting to see that result in improved productivity, reduced costs, but really greater customer satisfaction, faster resolution time, all the kind of mean time to resolution on tickets, all that stuff's improving. And then I think there's just sort of countless small examples, the very sponsors of this show, getting your taxes done faster, getting your accounting done better, getting your compliance audits, getting audit ready, all these kind of, text heavy enterprise workflows. When we're starting to put an application to it, we're starting to be able to deliver real end-to-end value. But I think, the reason people are struggling right now is we've got that kind of missing last mile problem where we've got these incredibly powerful models and we have not built the applications to fit them into our workflows.
And just actually, because I'd heard that thing about Microsoft, the GitHub example there of really where there has been significant value extracted in recent couple of years or so. Can you translate, so that situation there was a significant corpus of publicly available code sitting on GitHub, which it could really, I presume, was really used as the training data, which then equipped the model with being able to infer and recommend completions that were then much more appropriate.
Yeah.
When you take that to where are the opportunities to actually leverage AI in companies where the data in those companies is essentially confidential and ring-fenced corporate? There isn't an awful lot out there, perhaps, that models could have used to train generically on them. And then how can they perform better with when there isn't that available public corpus of relevant source material?
I think, yeah. So there's many ways for AI models to get access to data, and I'll get a little bit technical for a second. So of course there's the training data incorporated into the model, and that affects its ability to reason. The kind of existence of open source, and it's a little bit of a novelty in the tech industry, is that there is this kind of virtue of putting large bodies of code just in the public domain where it can be seen and trained on. But AI can access proprietary data. It can look something up into database. It can take structured and unstructured data, and put it in a special purpose, like an AI native database where it can retrieve that information as part of its response to a query or a question. We can do fine tuning where we do kind of last mile training before we ask the model. So, two terms to know. Training is kind of all the data we feed the model before we start asking it questions. Inference is the verb for asking it a question and getting it to answer it, right? So before we start asking the model to do inference, we can feed it a lot more last mile data in these kind of fine tuning steps. So there's many ways where if you start with a model that has been trained on just a vast corpus of general data, so maybe it doesn't have a pharmaceutical company's specific wet lab test result data, but it has trained on all kinds of public domain scientific data. It's read every paper that's ever been published, right? It has the context that a human being would have if it studied everything everywhere. And then you can kind of fine tune it. If you build a product designed for that purpose, as many of the kind of AI native biotech startups are doing, you can walk into a pharmaceutical company and kind of consume that last mile data from the customer and get some really, really interesting and exciting results. So it's definitely possible to put enterprise data into an AI native application and have something interesting come out. But it takes a little bit of onboarding. That's enterprise software.
Right. Yeah. Got it. Yeah. So it's a longer timeline. It takes more investment. It takes implementation sort of seen as well.
So do you see other patterns with AI implementations, between the ones that succeed and the ones that end up just becoming very expensive experiments?
This is almost like there's some universal truths about IT projects that succeed and become interesting experiments. I think sometimes sometimes we throw technology at problems that aren't technology problems. It's not going to succeed at solving them. And so certainly you've got to be sort of well equipped with an understanding of the limitations of this tech, like where it shines and where it struggles, and sort of select it. Like project selection, I think, is 80% of the problem. Let me just start and stop there. Like that, which would be true for any IT project of innovation. But like, you've got to pick a project that's tractable for the AI. The second place people go wrong is they're like, well, I'm in experimentation mode. I don't want like high stakes if I fail to deliver. So let me pick a toy problem. And so the other place people go wrong is they pick a problem that's a good fit for the AI, but it doesn't matter very much. It doesn't deliver a lot of value. You get the thing built with AI, and then there is no ROI case to put it in production, and so you don't. And so you've got to kind of, you've got to find that sweet spot of something important enough that it's meaningful and impactful and valuable if AI can help with it. But not so high risk that you'll never trust AI with it. So the idea of these co-pilot, there's a reason we kind of got going with these kind of co-pilot and assistant use cases, which is sort of like, well, if we can speed up the productivity, if we can give a human being an assistant, it can't make any mistakes if the human has the final word. It can't regress having human. It can't be worse than having the human do the job. It can only be better because it can only make the human, more efficient faster. So that's one theory of like a safe way to try out AI. I would say we're getting a little bit beyond that now, where we've seen the AI perform and it's in the domains that are good for it, where we can kind of trust it. So I think in customer support, we're still got it working in assistant mode more often than not. When we find that sweet spot where the AI is really good, they can work autonomously. They can work on their own. And data collection, analysis. There's so many places where the AI is good at it. And so as long as you've selected a project where there's big upside to making it work, then people will do that work. And so that's I would really say project selection is 80% of it. And the last 20% is, I don't know, having the right people on the project and having the right executive mandate. And, I'm not sure there's anything specific to AI about it.
Yeah. So that's interesting, Jocelyn. So for CFOs evaluating AI investments, what kind of framework should they use to figure out whether it's likely to deliver value in the longer term?
Some of this just comes down to having the right expertise and whether you kind of possess that already, whether you have a staff or advisors that are kind of well informed. I mean, I do think there's just like it's not philosophical at all. It's just sort of, can the tech do the job? Is it on an interception course to doing it? I would say even with that kind of advice and help from people who are technologically deep and don't have an agenda, right? They're not trying to sort of hype something up. They have expertise. They're sharing it, as an honest broker. I think there's also no substitute for informing your own intuitions by playing with these tools. They are so accessible. They are so easy to use. It's you certainly don't want to put your own proprietary data into a public platform like a ChatGPT or a Google Gemini, but frankly, many CFOs sit inside companies where they do have in-house instances where they can privately upload their data to a private instance of a model. But frankly, even if they don't, you don't have to put your own company's data into one of these tools to work with it. There's plenty of public financial data. There's plenty of S1s out there, the whole point of being a public company. And so put other companies, data that is public data into these things and start asking it questions, start interrogating it, see how it can reason, see what it can do, see where it makes mistakes and goes wrong. And that is not to say that it's your job to become the tech expert. I always want you working with that person at your side, but have some intuitions, have some ideas about where it might fail, what good questions it can ask, what good questions you should be asking of your advisors. But I think so fast forwarding past all of that, when I think about CFOs, think about places where human productivity really matters. So where do you have a lot of people working on, high volume tasks. I keep bringing up insurance claims underwriting because it's something that is, cube farms and cube farms of people doing it. But, the data entry, data processing, tagging, these are places, anything that involves sort of manipulation of text at scale, either understanding it or categorizing it, classifying it. These are things the models can be really good at. And if you've got a whole lot of human beings doing it, then chances are very good that there's a real impact to accelerating it, to speeding up and making that many humans better at their jobs. Another kind of pattern I see is it's very typical that if you would outsource a duty to BPO, just if you would send it off to a cube farm of human workers, of low-cost human workers in some other part of the world, there's every chance that it's a good fit for AI. And that's because it's sort of valuable enough that you're spending a bunch of money on it with a contractor, but efficiency matters to you more than absolute quality. There's a large volume of this work, so even small efficiency gains make a big difference. And it's simple enough, it's routine enough that you can describe it to a modestly skilled worker. And it's not so mission critical and core to your business that you would never let it, that you'd never outsource it. So if you would outsource to a BPO, it should already be on the short list of things you're contemplating doing with an AI.
Yeah. Actually, one of the...
And by the way, the BPOs are wise to this. They're all trying to figure out how to offer you AI-powered solutions. So maybe you'll do it with your BPO.
Yeah, we're seeing this certainly in the platforms like some of the ones we talked about there, where the cash transactions, even just categorizing transactions, which is a large portion of what has to go on. And I mean, the unwritten thing, of course, is that humans are not infallible. So the claim that AI might not get it right actually shouldn't hold as much water as it does, because the humans aren't doing the perfect job either. But there is one of the areas that we've seen a real utility is in what we call flux analysis, which is looking at a prior period, or rather comparing to prior periods. And often to do a proper job of that, you're taking information from disparate systems, be it payroll, be it CRM, be it a whole contracts management system, and you combine that with a ledger, and you're trying to understand why is 1 month different from the prior month. Yeah. And I tell you, AI has been really effective. Actually, Aleph, one of the sponsors, does that. It has a module in its platform. It does exactly that. And we've found that really valuable. And
that's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
Johnny, I'm so glad you brought this up, actually, because I think we have a tendency of thinking of AI as something that's trying to replace human workers or, improve their productivity, and that what AI is good for is just reducing costs. There's a lot of things AI can be good at that humans are bad at. And there's things that humans are good at and AI is bad at, right? We're just different, we're just different beings, and we have different capacities. And so this kind of analysis that you're talking about, a machine's going to be better. Humans can be a little bit buggy in the way that we analyze data. Sometimes we see patterns that aren't there. We confuse correlation for causation. Models can be, and it's also really hard for us to hold exponential numbers in our head or large data sets in our head and to kind of see patterns that are too far apart. So we'll see things that aren't there in data that's close together, and we'll miss things that are far apart. And so I think that in many cases, some of the exciting applications for AI are places where, it's not just, hey, we've got a lot of humans, so we could get a lot of productivity. It's actually places where, hey, the humans are kind of a B- at this, and the models could elevate us to the next level.
And then the term that we're hearing a lot is human in the loop. So being able to, it's that co-pilot sort of essence, but really the human remains substantially in control and has the ability to sort of architect or oversee what the AI is recommending or doing.
And I think, by the way, I think like you gave like such a good pragmatic, this is such a good use case, this kind of like what if analysis or gap analysis that financial analysts need to do, like a little bit further afield. But something I'm really excited about is it's very clear that in the same way that spotting those patterns in really disparate data sets is incredibly valuable in accounting, it's also really useful in scientific research. If you look at the last 2-3 years of Nobel Prizes that have been handed out, like the prizes in physics, in chemistry, in the natural and material sciences are going to scientists who are making breakthroughs working with AI, who are using AI to inform their intuitions or to expand the horizons of what they can do. When I think about that pharmaceutical use case that I'm so excited about, like part of what these models can do is actually help research scientists discover drugs faster or design an antibody instead of just trying to study all the antibodies that exist to find the properties they're looking for, but like design a de novo, completely new antibody that doesn't exist in nature that can target a condition very powerfully. And so we can't do those things with AI. This is it's the Steve Jobs bicycle for the mind again, right? It's giving humans superpowers that we didn't have. And so I think that's the real promise of this stuff.
So, Jocelyn, the big picture question of the day, we hear it all day, everywhere you go. Is AI in a bubble, or is all this investment sustainable?
Well, I have to say it is. But, if you had asked me just an ever so slightly different question, is AI overhyped? I would say, no, it's not. So I think it is not overhyped and yet it is a bubble. And that may seem like a contradiction in terms. But, I started my career I graduated from college with a computer science degree in 1997, which for those too young to remember, was like the kickoff to the dot-com boom, which, as all of us know, was immediately followed by the dot-com bust. So when we talk about a bubble, that's the one that always springs first to my mind. And it's really the most salient one in tech. We've had other kind of boom and bust cycles in different parts of the economy. But in tech, the bubble that burst was really the internet bubble. And so there was definitely a period of time in like 2000, 2001, 2002, sort of the core bust years, where the view really was that the internet had been overhyped and that, it just wasn't all that. But sitting here with, 25 years removed, I think we can say the internet was not overhyped. Here we are, like you can't imagine life
But the return at
without
the
internet.
time was certainly overestimated, right?
What was overestimated?
The return at the time was certainly overestimated.
Yeah, so the financial returns were really different from the short-term financial returns were really different from the long-term economic and social impact, right? So I don't think we can say the internet was overhyped, and I do not think AI is overhyped. The internet rewrote the economy, transformed every industry and sector. The global 2000 is almost completely different, short of maybe oil and gas companies. But like the top 50, the stack rank is all different now, and they're mostly, tech native companies in the top 10. All that happened because of the internet. Like what we're doing right now, a podcast is not like you can't even talk about podcasting without the internet. What would it be, a radio show? And so it really rewrote every aspect of society, not just the economy, let alone just the financial returns of those stocks. But let me tell you, because we weren't wrong, because I think the internet, the poor financial returns and the boom and bust in tech stocks happened precisely because the internet was so disruptive, did deserve all the hype, that the VCs, the investors at the time, and the entrepreneurs at the time, and tech workers at the time all had consensus. And they had consensus, they were right. The consensus was correct. But what happens when investors form a consensus about something and everybody wants to buy it? Well, prices go up. And so what happened with the internet was, and what happens when every entrepreneur wants to start a company and thinks they ought to be starting a company and the opportunity to start a company is now, and there's so much VC money sloshing around the system and it can't all back the sure things. And so we're in the business of risk capital. So we start backing the long tail of teams and ideas. And so what happens is even the best, most successful companies, the prices get bid way, way up. And the truth is, even in the dot-com boom and bust, like if you bought Google or Amazon at any price, even companies like eBay, LinkedIn, Yahoo that, didn't quite become the creme de la creme, but in those like dot-com boom years, like those were considered some of the most overpriced companies. But there was no price where you wouldn't be really happy you bought that stock and held it, 30 years later. But where we really lost our way is backing teams and ideas that were wrong or that were too early, and like prices collectively arose because only with hindsight that we know which company ended up being Google and which company ended up being Pets.com. And the truth is, we like to mock like those kind of the poster children of bad idea startups weren't bad ideas. Pets.com, Chewy is a public company today. Webvan, another big failure. Instacart, a public company today. They were too early. They weren't actually incredibly wrong ideas. Those investors were not wrong about the ideas. Those entrepreneurs weren't wrong about the idea. But they were too early for the market. And maybe they weren't the right teams in all cases. And so I think we're in a cycle like that, where we have a correct consensus. We are consensus right about AI in amongst investors and entrepreneurs. But absolutely, entrepreneurs feel incredible, like tech workers feel incredible pressure that if they're ever going to start a company, it should be now. And they've got to cudgel their brains and find an idea, whether or not they have one naturally, organically. And VCs are so excited that we are bidding up, the prices are high across the board, and we're taking relatively more risk into the long tail of ideas and teams. And those are the conditions where we may find that, collectively the returns may be lackluster in the short term. I think in the long term, they'll be great if you have the fortitude to hold. And so I wouldn't be sort of desperately trying to buy your way into and I see different things happening. Like I see people paying any price to be in what they perceive of as the next generation Google, right? Like the OpenAIs and Anthropics, like these companies that are raising at these wild price premiums because they are perceived to be safe. They are perceived to be, hey, these are going to be winners of the next generation. No, so I don't know where to go in AI. It doesn't seem safe. Let me back the safe horse. If you do that, the market has priced in the premium for that. You may or may not make a lot of money. Who's to say? And then I happen to think that at the other end of the telescope, doing real venture, doing the sort of the high risk seed stage stuff, concentrated capital, we know that at the earliest stages the failure rates will be high. But if we find at the right price some of the people who go far, we will deliver massive returns. Like that too feels not safe. Like the risk is super high, but we at least are kind of we're not paying stratospheric prices. Hopefully, even seed prices have been pushed up, but hopefully they are still reasonable enough that if these companies do well, the whole firm and all our limiteds will do well. And then I think somewhere in between where people are sort of chasing hype, is where sort of in aggregate we may or may not do well. I can't give stock picking advice, but I do feel like the conditions right now of enthusiasm, of high prices, of abundant capital, and of people getting into the startup game without maybe a true North Star around their mission. Those are all conditions that say to me, we're going to stub our toe on some of these.
Do you put much stock in this, the news item that's going around of that circular investment from OpenAI into NVIDIA? And is that something that you think holds water?
Yeah. So when you ask me about a bubble, mine goes to sort of venture capital dollars. And there is like a different kind of bubble happening among the big established tech companies that are all... that I'm a little bit less worried about, maybe just because I have this tunnel vision and I'm really focused on the early stage. But look, it's not just sort of money bouncing around, right? Like at the end of the day, this is CapEx build out, and companies are building data centers and installing servers and GPUs. And so and it may be that the people are buying the GPUs from NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is buying cloud services from them, and then there is a little bit of like the velocity of money flowing back and forth, ping-ponging between those parties. Maybe some of this goes into picking public stocks and whatever. Maybe there's some short-term correction there, but like ultimately, it's not vapor. They aren't buying and selling vapor to each other. They are buying and selling hardware and servers. And buildings and cooling, and that infrastructure can only crash if the demand for compute goes down in the future and not up. It may be that in the short term they're being so aggressive about build out because they're desperate to compete with each other and not fall behind. I think the hyperscalers absolutely feel like there's an infrastructure arms race going on, and so that is, I think, kind of driving up demand in the short term for compute, and that could soften. But if you ask me over a 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon, 20-year horizon, do I think there will be demand for less compute in the world or more? It's just like, it's an insane question. Of course it will be more.
Yeah, yep.
We will always have demand for more compute, and we will never regret building out too much infrastructure. If we build it 2 years ahead of need, that may happen. I do think there's like a weird thing going on right now where even though tech is booming, it's actually the worst job market in tech there's been for quite some time, which people like to blame on AI, but I actually don't think is because of AI. I think your finance audience will appreciate this. I think it's because all the capex these companies are putting out is depreciating, and that's turning into a big enough opex line to offset payroll. And the way to rein it in is to keep control of payroll, just to keep opex under control. So I actually think that's kind of what's limiting the demand for talent right now. Oddly, that like we're spending so much on capex, it's actually competing for impact on margin. That's one woman's crazy hypothesis. So anyway, I don't believe that human software engineers aren't needed anymore. I think this is one of those things like ATM machines where, you know, or so many kinds of technology advances where like you make it more accessible, you make the good, in this case, the labor to build products. If you make that cheaper, more and more people will want to build products, and there will be more work than ever for people who build products with technology. I don't know if we're still going to call it software engineer in 10 years, but I think that work is only expanding. So no, and I think the demand for compute is only expanding. They're not. We have unlimited demand for innovation. Any kind of pause is going to be short-term and temporary in my book.
Right. Why do you suppose agentic AI has become so popular?
I really don't know. Like to me, it's sort of like it's natural and incremental to what we had before. But I think, but like I couldn't really get why ChatGPT was such a big deal either. Like these models could already do that. Putting up like a command line prompt where you could talk to the model, it seemed like, well, yeah, obviously you could do that. And so I think that I think what ChatGPT and what a chatbot and an agent have in common is they are a form factor. They are a user experience. They are a way for humans to interact with and get value from the AI. And so to me, like what's exciting is not that like, you know, we put it in a programmatic unit that could operate independently and do stuff. Because that's the obvious implication of this technology existing. But I think that that's the product that people can interact with. And so we've given them a whole new way of interacting with AI, right? Like pre ChatGPT, I give OpenAI credit. They were the ones to put this UX out in the world. This was the browser model. Like pre-browser, the internet was there since the 60s, 70s, but it was horrible to access, right? Like you had to kind of really be in the clubhouse of nerds to telnet your way in, and then and so it was the same with these models. You had to really write code and call their APIs to get them to do anything. And so ChatGPT made them accessible to everyone to talk to interact with. What agents do is it makes it accessible for everyone to get stuff done, to give work and get a result back. So one part of me is like, boy, that's kind of a narrow little vocabulary distinction, but I think reality is what people interact with are products, not models. And so putting this stuff in a form factor where people can use it is closing that last mile gap.
So actually, I never heard it described that way before. There's almost like there's a humanizing component of it. So you're making something quite relatable to by calling it an agent or having an interaction with like an agent that you could think of as a person or as an entity or something.
Yeah, that people can get their heads around it as something that's helping them.
And is that? But there's a structural thing from an AI implementation side that splitting the task into multiple individual entities helps control quality of output. There's that kind of justification to it as well. Is that right?
Sure. I mean, I think that. Well, agent has started like. We've started calling everything powered with AI an agent, so I don't even know what the word means anymore. But yeah, I mean, like, but this is like, like structurally breaking down the task and sort of fine tuning and designing, reasoning and patterns around sort of specific things, and having. It's kind of letting the programming model seep into the user interface a little bit, maybe more than it needs to. But like at the end of the day, I don't want to interact with, if I'm trying to do my expenses, I don't want to interact with one AI agent that's tagging my expenses with their right category and another one that's reviewing my policy violations and a third agent is like, I just want one expenses agent. And if it's in the background calling 3 different agents and orchestrating across them, great, bully, like feel free to like technologically design it that way. And so that, but I want to talk to like one expenses bot that's doing my expenses for me and I can just sign off and never have to do expenses again, which is like, we're so close to that. Like, I'm kind of like, come on, Expensify. Why is this not built? Like, why have you not? I'm sure it's built. Like, why have you not shipped it to me already? Put it in my veins.
Yeah, no, I think it's the agent AI, the agentic AI is just something that we're seeing pitched as part of these new finance platforms a lot. Like, it's really in this whole terminology and the way that they're sort of, basically pitching us and how it's technologically advanced. And so that's the reason I was kind of digging into a little bit to try to understand a bit more about it. But I appreciate
absolutely.
all the context there.
I could tell you sometimes we get excited about funny things, but I think, I think we're excited about a form factor where we get to give instructions and the thing goes away and does a complicated task and gets back to us. Like, I think I think it's fundamentally about a new form factor for interacting with a problem. Like why do we get excited about smartphones? We had, right? Like, what can they do that a laptop couldn't do? But like the act of gesture, the act of touch, shake to report a bug, you were interacting with it in a totally different way than a mouse and a keyboard, a way that many people found quite a bit more intuitive or visceral or whatever. So like the smartphone, I think the agent is giving us a new UX paradigm for AI. I think that's what's truly got people excited.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you're extremely familiar with all this, but I've used Claude Code a bunch of times, and that's an extremely appealing interface to have with a bunch of code, whatever tasks that you're doing, which might not be, you're not about writing an awful lot of code, but you're about doing some analysis, some visualization. It becomes very easy to make something quite significant happen. Yeah. And it's a very linguistic, you're talking to a buddy almost in terms of getting it done.
Yeah, it's like really, having your own team, your own staff. Yeah. Everybody's a manager now because you've got some, AI subordinates. I think it's really kind of is going to upend some of our assumptions around what people can accomplish, like how, on their own, and how much scope or mandate can an individual tackle before they have to be kicked upstairs to management. I think it's kind of an exciting time.
Yeah. And Jocelyn, you have such a unique perspective on the investment scene. I can't let you go without asking about the prospects for funding next 12 to 18 months and how founders should be thinking about incorporating AI into their pitches. They've been everywhere, right? But as we get more and more sophisticated about it, maybe there's a better way to do that.
I don't have a public markets crystal ball. People whisper about the prospects of recession. We've been hearing those whispers for 2 years. Will it happen next year? I don't know. I have no idea. What I do know is that VC firms have raised a ton of capital. And so in the next 12 to 18 months, we're not going to run out of dry powder. And so I think the funding appetite among VCs, sometimes we get more cautious. Even though we've got lots of dry powder, we can sit on it when we're feeling worried about the public markets or when we're worried about our ability to go raise the next fund. But I think we're not going to see funding dry up in the next 12 to 18 months. I think it will remain relatively abundant, especially at the early stage where prices are not yet that high. And so I think it is already actually a little harder to come by those big later stage rounds if you don't have really terrific traction. And so I think there is this kind of for companies who look really proven and high traction, abundant, large funding rounds at high prices are available. For early stage companies that are all narrative, no traction, but lots of promise, there's abundant funding. I think there's a little bit of an uneasy spot in the middle where you've been around long enough for the narrative to wear off and for investors to want to see results. And then the comparison, there's the expectations for results are very high. And it can be tricky if you find yourself in that kind of middle spot. And you really kind of need to break through with outcomes, with traction. As far as, how I would advise entrepreneurs to involve AI in their pitch, there is already a pullback. I mean, the numbers are out there that if your startup does not involve AI, investment capital is already a little bit hard to come by. And so I think certainly if an entrepreneur's North Star is how do I maximize my funding, then it is certainly to pursue an AI idea and to try to sprinkle AI pixie dust on your startup, even if it isn't natively an AI idea. As a VC, I don't love that. I see why everybody gives that advice because it matches the behavior of the VCs. But like as a VC who's trying to truly invest in opportunities that are created by novel AI, I'd like to think I can see through that. Maybe not every VC does. I'm not going to be happy. Like if I see something that is like, that is AI sprinkled on, just add AI, like it's not very interesting to me. But I can't, more importantly, as an entrepreneur, like your concern with starting a company your first concern shouldn't be, is my idea backable? Like that assigns VCs a credit we don't deserve. Like we don't know what are the best ideas. We don't know. We are not market validation. Customers are market validation. Like go socialize, and before you spend 10 years of your life pursuing a mission and an idea, like at least that long. I mean, how long does it take for companies to go public or exit? Like if your company fails, sure, but if it succeeds, it's 10 years or more. And so before you throw your life into that and make that big commitment, which honestly is a much bigger commitment than any VC is making, writing a check, like you should convince yourself that this is a good idea, that this is your passion, that it has legs. And whether a VC will fund it shouldn't be the arbiter of that. Like it's just the other way around. Like you should build that conviction on, is there really a market here? Can this product really be built? Is this going to be defensible or going to get snatched right out from underneath me, even if I do, demonstrate its success. And so all those core things that VCs should be looking for, you should be looking for first, not in order to raise money, but in order to convince yourself that you should give up all your other opportunities and pursue this for an unreasonable amount of time with an unreasonable amount of energy and effort. And like, if you can convince yourself that there's an immense business here and it, deserves to exist, and you're so passionate about it, you can't see any other alternative than to, quit your job, walk away from your life and pursue this wholeheartedly. Once you've done that, then like, man, convincing the VC should be like, we're the easy part. We should be the last step in your decision making.
There you go.
Great words.
Yeah, great advice. Jocelyn Goldfein, Zeta Venture Partners, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
All right, Johnny Walker, my frequent podcast partner.
Thank you very much again, David, and thank you, Jocelyn.
All right. This has been Speaking C-Suite, exploring how finance leaders can become true strategic partners and drive growth across their companies. Check us out on YouTube and all the major podcast platforms. I'm David Hemingway. I'm the founder and host of the Angel Nest podcast. We've also done many other episodes with Johnny Walker at Ruled, so you can check them out there at theangelnest.com or at ruled.com. Thanks for tuning in. So long until next time.